Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Decryption and I hope you are well. With the brand new release of Unreal 7, more and more people are joining games design than ever, and Unreal especially is getting so many new users. But with this amount of users, there is also this amount of misinformation around, and it can just be very confusing to get into, and it makes a lot of people nervous on where to start. So in this tutorial, we're going to cover 10 mistakes beginners make in Unreal and how you should avoid them. So let's get started. So the first one is one I actually made an entire video for previously, called Progress Over Perfection. So in Unreal, there are tons of different ways to do anything you need. There really isn't one right way to do what you need because there is always going to be a different opinion. But that doesn't make it wrong or right. There is no right answer. The right answer is the one that works for you. Here's a prime example that I often encounter and have discussions with people about. Say you're making an item system for an inventory. So you have your items. The item system I use is called narrative items, the inventory. They use these narrative item blueprint classes, so I can open it up, I've got my code in there, and I've got my item details. That's how they create their items. Some people don't like that, and they don't like that you have to have a separate item for every single one. Some people prefer a data table to store all of their items. So you have a structure that outlines all your items' details, and then you have one large data table that contains every single item's details in your entire game. If they ever want item details, they come to this data table. Some people don't like this approach. Personally, I don't like this approach. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong. If you are a solo dev, working on your project alone, you're only ever going to work on your project alone, and it's not a massive project, a data table is absolutely perfect. But it falls over if any of those start to change. So for example, if you're doing a project with two people, every time one person comes into the data table and modifies it, it will lock it so nobody else can edit it. Meaning when the second person needs to add an item, they can't. But if you're working alone, that's not a problem. If you've got millions of items, a data table might be easier to import and export, but it's also a bigger load when you have to start looping through them to find items. So there is no right or wrong way to do it. And this is something that always tricks up new developers, is finding the perfect way to do something. It does not exist. I will argue that every single day. There is no perfect solution to do something. There is only the way that works for you. There might be more optimized routes. So for example, I've explained two ways of doing items. You can use an item blueprint. You can use a data table. Another way you could have done it is you could have had a variable here called item details, which is a custom struct, and it's an array. That's another way of doing it. You store the variable on the player. That is probably not the best way of doing it, because then every single time your player's in the world, it's loading every single item's details, even though you don't need it. It's a huge waste of memory. But that doesn't mean it's not for everybody. If you've got 3 items that you use in your game all the time, every time, an array of 3 items is not going to make any difference. It's going to be completely fine. So that's what I mean, is there is always an optimal solution for you. It doesn't mean it's going to be the perfect way. You could go to a game dev at Rockstar, EA, Ubisoft, their lead programmer who designed the systems, and say, how did you do this? And they'll tell you, and you will find another developer who will tell you that's the wrong way of doing it. There just is. That's how it works, is there is so many different ways to do things. If you want your character to move around, most people use the character movement component. You've also now got the mover component option. Some people create their movement system from scratch and don't even use that. There's 3 ways to move your character around. There is so many different ways to do everything in Unreal. So what I'm trying to get at is, yes, it's scary when you want to go in and do something, especially if you're working on your game. The fear of working on something for 2 weeks and then a year later you realise your entire game's messed up because of that, because you've made the wrong calls. It sucks. It is absolutely going to suck. But just do it. Generally, you will never create your game if you don't just do it. The amount of developers I speak to that are planning their game for years and have never even touched it, it's ridiculous. Because don't forget, the longer you wait on this, the more updates and plugins and things are going to change. If you plan your game in Unreal 3, and then by the time you finally get around to it, you're jumping into Unreal 6, what are you going to do? It's going to be completely different. So this is what I mean by just get stuck in, just work on it. It might mess up. Good, embrace those mistakes as learnings for next time. And that leads me on to the next thing. The second point is people always want to go to the latest and greatest every single time they can. And I see this even today by experienced devs, and it's a horrible way of working unless you've got a real requirement for it. As of this recording, it's the 29th of November, right? If we look at the Unreal for Linux page, just to see the Linux, just to see the Unreal versions, Unreal 5.7 was released in November 12th. I kid you not, an hour after that was uploaded, we had people coming to the Narrative Discord asking, why haven't we updated the plugin yet? An hour. And this is the problem you're going to run into. If you use plugins, which you absolutely should be using plugins, we'll cover that in a point coming up, but if you use plugins, you cannot rely on the developers to release an update as soon as Unreal drops 5.7. There's going to be upgrade issues, there's going to be code changes, and then you've got to wait for Epic to verify it, which can take up to 2 weeks for them to do. And it's even longer because when an engine drops, because every developer wants the latest and greatest, you have to wait even longer for Epic to approve every single one of these plugins. And there are millions of them. And that's just if you use plugins. Using the latest and greatest is not something you should be doing unless you are experimenting or you need a feature in it. There's a saying in the company I work at, leading edge, not bleeding edge. And what they mean by that is this is a brand new version of Unreal. These numbers here are the major, the minor, and the patch versions. That's how they label Unreal versions. It's called semantic versioning. And it basically is that, major, minor, patch. Major is a massive release. It is so many things have changed that you are probably going to fail trying to upgrade your project to it. So trying to upgrade a project from Unreal 4 to Unreal 5 was a gruesome time. So many of the APIs were changed. Minor is you're probably going to be able to upgrade without an issue. Probably. That's the key. It's not 100% successful because sometimes you just have to change it. But you will stand a very good chance on upgrading to it. And patch is you are 100% okay. This is a minor bug fix only. That's it. So Unreal has just dropped 5.7. We've been in Unreal 5 for a while, so that's the major version. But they've just dropped 5.7. And if you've seen half the videos I have of everybody saying how big of a deal 5.7 is, there's a lot changed in it. A lot of changes mean the potential for a lot of bugs. So I am not moving to 5.7 yet. I'm going to have to load it up to help develop plugins and stuff in it, but I'm actually going to wait for my main project for 5.7.1 to come out. And that means there's a patch version with loads of bug fixes in it. Because then 5.7, it very well might be stable. But if you run into a bug that you can't get around, you've either got to fix it yourself in the engine C++, or you've got to somehow downgrade your project, which you can't do. Not easily. So this is what I'm saying is, don't always go for the latest and greatest updates on anything. Not just Unreal, your plugins as well. Only upgrade if they are stable, and if you're not in the middle of a live project. The amount of live projects I see as soon as Unreal drops 5.7 going, we're upgrading to it. Why? Well, it's the latest, but do you need anything in it? Check the changelogs out. So if you look at the changelog for Unreal 5.7, or the release notes as they call it, start looking down it. Do you actually need half of the things in here? Because I don't need megalites. I don't really need those volumes because I don't use it, even though it looks really cool. I don't need layered materials, I don't need nanite foliage, but it's still experimental, so they probably don't recommend you using that in a live game anyway. And there's tons of other features in here. Do you actually need any of them? If the answer is no, you don't need a single one of them, why are you moving to 5.7? There is no need to move to 5.7 if you don't need it. You may as well just wait until 5.7 becomes more stable at 5.7.1, 0.2, 0.3, upgrade to then. And then you've got not only the latest and greatest features, you've got them wrapped with bug fixes as well. Even better. Obviously, if you look at this and you go, yes, I need the vast majority of this, absolutely, upgrade if you need to. But make backups. Whatever you do, make backups. But that's the key thing. So, leading on to the next thing is the tutorials. Unreal has been going around since early 2000s, maybe even before. It's one of the biggest engines in the world that is available to the public. It's sometimes hard to find what you want in the latest version of the engine you're in. So what I mean by that is if you go to an Unreal 4 tutorial and say how to get the best lighting, it will show you how to add point lights, how to bake them into your scene, and how to do all the optimizations inside Unreal 4. You might be able to follow along and it might work for you. Maybe you don't need real-time lighting. However, half of that is kind of changed in Unreal 5. If you're using real-time lighting, you just drop a light in your world and it works. That's it. It's built to make it more efficient that way. And sometimes if you look at, say, how do you add LODs to a model in Unreal 4? So say this box or something. Unreal 4 will tell you to open up your Blender, your Maya, create multiple versions and import it. In Unreal 5, it's got tools built in to do that. So this is what I mean. You need to be careful with the tutorials you pick, because some of them are going to give you out-of-date information or information that just isn't going to work for you. And, well, this is where it becomes a problem. If you're a trusted channel like Decryption, who's, a trusted member of society, why not? How do you know? Well, the truth is you don't. That's the tough part. The way I start when I'm looking for a tutorial for something I've never done, say meta sounds, I always look for the latest tutorial on my engine version. So if a tutorial's 2 years old, but there's another one that is 6 months old, I'll probably look at the 6 months one. The chances of it containing the up-to-date information are higher. A tutorial can't show you Unreal 5.2's version in 5.6. That's just not going to work unless they're identical. But if the process changes, they can't show you that. So in my case, I'm in help about Unreal. I'm in Unreal 5.6.1. So I'll look for Unreal 5.6. You don't need to worry about the patch version unless it's something very, very specific. Unreal 5.6 meta sounds, and I'll follow that tutorial. Chances are I will have a good understanding of it. Some things might just be baked into Unreal for lifetime, such as how do you make behavior trees. In that case, a newer tutorial will probably give you different features you won't have access to, but it doesn't mean the older tutorials are going to be wrong. So what I'm trying to get at is, when you jump onto a tutorial, just have a quick look around the comments before you start watching it to see if people are saying it's not going to work for them, or if it's out of date or it doesn't work anymore. If the comments are full of those, chances are you're going to need to find another tutorial. However, and my Unreal crashed while I was recording this, fantastic. As I was saying, if the comments are saying how good the tutorial is, that it's worked for them, fantastic. You can probably follow that tutorial. So that's where I'd start. I would start looking for your engine version and then what you need. Find the tutorial that is not the newest. If a tutorial is an hour old, it's not going to make a difference compared to a month old, unless there's been a big release. But try to find the tutorial that is on your engine version, at least, because then you're going to have a higher chance of it working for you. If your thing is so vague, you may have to approach older tutorials if you find one that works, but be prepared to translate it in your head. So if they say, oh, in order to make this model super efficient, you need to add LODs, if you're using nanite, you know you don't need to do that. So you can just skip that part in your head. This is tough for a beginner, but there's not much we can do with that one. But that's the point, is try to find newer tutorials that do what you need. But old tutorials, they're going to be classics for a reason. So this brings us on to the next part that I was roughly talking about a moment ago. Plugins. You should be using plugins. I've never had a reason from a dev why they shouldn't be using plugins. Like, the only reason off the top of my head I can think is I want to learn more about this system. Fine. If you want to learn how to make, say, a dialogue system, so you're not buying a dialogue plugin, that's probably a good excuse. If you know how to make a dialogue system, or you just want to work on your game, buy a dialogue system. And don't be scared of people saying you're asset flipping. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of Unreal plugins, assets, and everything that you can use. They are there for you to use them. Asset flipping is a sad terminology. That looks really cool. I'm just looking down the Epic store. Asset flipping is a sad terminology that's used nowadays when devs try to cheat to make a game, to make a quick buck, as they say. Where you buy 5 or 6 plugins, asset packs, shove it in a level, do minimum amount of work and release it. Some people don't believe asset flipping exists. That's the other thing. It's like cancel culture. Some people believe it exists, some people don't. For me, you can buy as many assets and plugins for your game as you want. If you put a decent amount of work into it, it's not asset flipping. That's the key. It's how much work you put into it. If I come here and buy this dungeon map by Cinti, who are a fantastic company and I highly recommend, and then you buy, I don't know, like this zombie game kit, and then you just put them two together and release it, you're probably going to get accused of asset flipping because you've not done anything. However, if you buy this Cinti pack and this, I don't know, animal pack and this zombie kit, and then you move around all of the dungeons, you add more, you expand the map, you add these monsters in, you give them AI, you make them run around, you add this zombie kit, you modify the UI, the guns, you change it. Who's going to accuse you of asset flipping at that point? Because you've put a lot of work into it, and that's the key. You're not flipping assets to make money, you're taking the assets, modifying their states to release it. How much you modify them to release it, that's going to be always up to interpretation. Yeah. You will get people who are purists who say never ever use plugins. But this is where I have the debate with a lot of people. So, I use a plugin for the longest of time now I've used it called Narrative Tales. It was the first ever plugin I bought on Unreal. It's by Ruben, who made the Simpsons Hit and Run series. So, originally, this is the story I tell people, because narrative, as you can see, is like 1,800 Corona, or whatever CR means. But it's like £300, right? When I bought it, it was worth £100, but I got a discount of 50% because it was Black Friday. Because it's around this time I bought it. This is the story I tell people when they complain about the price or that you shouldn't use plugins. I spent 2 months writing my own quest system for my game. I was working on this stealth game, right? Have I got a video of that? I just went to see if I can find it, and it's 3 years ago now, but it's getting that music. So it's this system here. Look, this is the game I was working on, where you were an agent in a cultist town. And unfortunately, this video just shows my crouching demo attempt, which works quite well, to be honest. However, I was writing my own quest system for this game here. And I spent 2 months writing that quest system. Bearing in mind, I'd only been using Unreal for about a year, 2 years at this point. I had a blueprint class in my details panel. So it was down here, it was a map of quests, and then inside the quest was the objectives that you could do. I spent 2 months writing this, learning everything I needed to, planning the structure out. I could put multiple tasks in, so you could have branching quests. I had objectives in there, and I had everything I needed. The process looped down the map, and then when you completed one, it moved to the next point. 2 months I spent writing this, which, if you're an experienced dev, sounds insane, right? It does, but I was still learning Unreal. And then I ran into a critical flaw with my entire quest system that meant I had to basically undo a lot of work, and that was optional objectives. On mine, anytime you completed a quest, on mine, when you completed an objective, you immediately moved to the next one. That's it. There was no flexibility in it. So I wrote loads of quests using this system. And then I ran into optional objectives. You know, you're walking down the side of this house, Maybe there's an objective that you need to not get caught by the tenant. Okay, it's optional though. Problem is, when you completed the optional, it moves straight to the next task because it thinks it was a completed task. And it was proving, just the way I designed it, very, very difficult to do. And around this time, Ruben started launching his Simpsons series, so I started watching it, as millions of people did, and he announced his Narrative Tales package. And I was so, no, I don't need this, I'm writing my own. Yes, I've just spent 2 months doing it. Yes, his also contains dialogue and does everything I need, and he swears by it, but I can do my own, right? And then he said the line, which sold me: refunds can be provided, no questions asked. And I was at that point, I was like, alright, maybe I just spend the £50 on Black Friday, test it. If it doesn't work, I get the refunds back, right? Tested it, I have not once since looked back. Every single project I've worked on since, if it's not been against the rules, I have used Narrative Tales. It did everything I needed, including dialogue and quests. Everything that I needed in mind, fixed, sorted. It took me less than 2 hours to learn the entire system. It was really, really easy. And this isn't a pitch for Narrative. Yes, it is biased because I worked for them, but this story was before I worked for them. But the point is, I spent money on this. I used the plugin. It cost me £50. On Black Friday, this is like 150, 200, costs 300. How many hours did I spend 2 months on working on my system for it to fail when £50 would have done all for me? And this is what I'm saying. I have, in my YouTube game, a bunch of plugins. So if I come back to my content, my plugins folder here, you see I have a ton of different plugins in my game. I don't have an abysmal amount. Like, all of these are ones I've covered before that are all really, really good ones. Like async loading screen gives you a loading screen. Auto size comments just resizes your blueprint comments so they don't shrink down too small. I have no idea what that is. Chess Game Creator literally adds an entire game of chess into your game for minigames. Fantastic. And then all the others, I've got loads of narrative plugins as well. Look, an NPC optimizer. All these plugins I've picked because I like using them, and they save a ton of time in one way or another. And this is why I'm saying you should absolutely use plugins. Plugins can speed up your development in a massive sense. And these are just modular plugins that I'm using. You also have framework-based plugins, like we'll use Narrative Pro for an example, but there's all sorts like Narrative Pro, ACF, Survival Game Kit, there's loads, where it doesn't just add the odd little thing, it gives you an entire starting point to your game. If you know what game you want to make, check out these frameworks, and if it seems like it does most of what you want, potentially consider purchasing it. Now I know Narrative Pro is one of the most expensive ones on the market. I know. But you've got other ones like ACF or Survival Game Kit. There's loads of different ones that you can look at buying if that's what you want to do. Personally, I'm not using a framework. One, because this framework wasn't out when I was making my game. But two, I like the idea of creating these systems. I'm more into it to make the systems than using another one. But there are limits to that, as I've said. I use a bunch of plugins. So the thing is, don't be afraid of plugins. If you are a developer who wants to write everything yourself, your game is going to take a lot longer to do. It just is. Picking up a micro plugin here and there can speed up your development so much. If you don't mind using plugins, look into a framework if you know what game you want. It will be different challenges because you're not only learning Unreal, but you're learning the plugin as well. But you've got all these systems built in, up and running for you. So don't be afraid of using plugins because they absolutely can change the course of your game. It might take you 5 years to write it fresh. It might take you 2 years to use plugins. It might take you 6 months to use a framework. So it depends what you want to do and what your game is. So this next point is roughly on the category of starting your game, but it's using the built-in Unreal templates. So even if you are using plugins, this does exclude frameworks because most frameworks come with their own setups. But if you come to a new project, you've got these templates here. And I saw an Unreal video ages ago that I cannot find for the life of me, where it's a guy from Unreal talking about people look down upon the templates because they think that's what beginners do, so they'll always start with blank. But then he was saying absolutely not. And that the Ark survival game, which I've never played, is one of the most popular games apparently. Their project is still called First Person Template in the editor, or it was, or something, because they used the template and look what they made. The templates are here to give you a starting point. You absolutely can add it and then just get rid of most of it. And you can absolutely get rid of most of it. It doesn't matter. But the point is, these templates can give you such a huge starting point. You shouldn't look down on them. Absolutely use them. And you know what the best part is? Most of them now have variants. So like if I come to the vehicle and click variant, you've got a different bunch of variants you can use, which is these basic vehicle projects with extra abilities. So like time trial mode, all built in, with a UI and everything. Perfect. Off-road or all, add all of them. Same with the third person. In a course that I'm going to be releasing in like the next month, we're using the combat variant to drive most of the game because that's what we need, and it saves 10-20 hours to recreate all that from scratch. So this is what I mean. Templates are not a bad thing. If a template is doing half of what you need, use it. That's what they're there for. So these next 5 are less about how to start your project, but rather when you're working in the project. So this 6th one is going to be very controversial because it is, and I do get it, because if you're an artist, you're not a coder. You don't want to be a coder. You might do, good, great, you're a mix of both. But typically, you don't want to be touching code. But if you're the one working on your project, which is the key difference here, if you're hired to just do artwork, don't be touching coding unless you need to. You don't need to. But if you're the one leading or writing your own project, don't be afraid of the code on any aspect, C++ included. I know C++ is given the bad rap it is. It's complicated, it's hard, it's easy to make mistakes. Absolutely, it is. But with tools like ChatGPT or an amazing community or a friend, somebody who knows it, it can make a world of difference. It can unlock doors that you are not allowed to do in blueprints only, really. So for example, one that I always promote is the gameplay ability system. If you're working on any type of game, sorry, just had to ban a spam account there, somebody spamming the Discords. If you're working on any type of game that uses abilities that you can buy, sell, activate, the gameplay ability system is amazing. And unfortunately, you can only do it in C++ for the most part. But that's only the initial setup. Once you've done the initial setup, that's it, you're done. You can then use it in blueprints to create your abilities like normal. So don't be afraid of all code. Coding is complicated. That's why they get paid the big bucks. It just is. But it's not impossible to learn. It's not like it's learning another language. It will be in English. Hopefully you understand English when you're working on it. But it will be there. So if I open up my player here, if you've never seen a blueprint, let's open a different one with actual code. If you've never seen a blueprint code before, these nodes are going to look foreign to you. They're going to look completely confusing. Break it down one by one. Red nodes are pretty much where you always start. Debug key 1, hover over it. Events for when the 1 key is pressed or released. That's it. When you press the 1 key, this fires. Pressed is when you've pressed it down. Released is when you've let go. That's it. And then it comes across. Get all actors of class with tag. And I'm passing in a class and a tag. So this is getting all the actors in the seed of the class sandbox character, which is my player's blueprint, with a tag of rogue. That's it. It returns the actors. I get the first one and I possess them. Possess. Ooh. Take over. Control. That's all it means. But that's it. And that's how you should approach any blueprint code. Like we can come up to this one here. What does this mean? It's completely confusing. Break it down. Hover over it. Event for when this IA triggers. IA is an input action. So when the player presses, interact. When it's started, begin the interaction. When it's cancelled or completed, end it. That's it. But that's blueprints. C++ is the same. So in here, look. Post gameplay effect execute. So post means after. gameplay effect is part of the gas system, execute. So after a gameplay effect has been executed, you don't need to know any of this stuff up here just at the moment, because this is the bit we're focusing on. And then in here, health, because I've added a comment look to make it easy. When the data, evaluated data attribute, what does that mean? I don't know, let's skip it for now. Equals health, okay? So when this data's here being passed in, so when this function runs with this data, and the data is health, set the health. This is what I mean. It sounds easy for me to read it out, it absolutely does, and you will need to take some courses, it will get confusing, you will make mistakes, that's okay. Remember tip 1, don't worry about perfection, just as long as it works. But avoiding the code outright will lock you into a box that will make it harder for you. I've had discussions with other developers before who aren't coders who have just said, I'm not touching C++, ever. Even if I sent them the code, not touching it. They're so against it. If I come here and make a mistake, save it, it's going to tell me I've made a mistake. It doesn't matter if you mess it up. If you've made a backup, you can restore all of it. So I know I can just get rid of it. But you can always ask for help as well. That's the other key thing. So I'm not saying you have to write everything in C++. It's not for you, it's not for you. That's fine. But don't avoid it just because you don't want to do it. That's going to lock you into a box that's going to make your life a bit harder. So if I said to you, hey, you're looking to write an ability system, just use the gameplay ability system. It's like 30 lines of C++ copied and pasted. Then you've got an ability system built into Unreal. No point avoiding it. Just ask for more information. Ask for help. Use ChatGPT. Find my latest video on implementing gameplay ability system in a single player game. This is what I mean. Don't avoid the code. Code can absolutely make or break your game. It can make it easier or a lot harder. So the next part is build your game in an event-driven way if you need to, versus event tick-driven. And what do I mean by this then? So event-driven is exactly what it means. When an event happens, there is a reaction which happens because of it. You know the old saying, every action has an equal and opposite reaction, right? So when I click play on here, an event is triggered that it starts loading the world and I spawn in. It will obviously take a while. I've not run this project for a long time. But this is an event-driven approach. The other option is time-driven or tick-driven. So, we're in now. So if I press forwards, my character runs forwards. That's the event. If I press backwards, he moves backwards. It is event-driven. It is an event happening triggered by something else. So the trigger is me pressing forwards, the character moves forwards, right? We saw this a moment ago in here. When I press the 1 key, it runs this code. The other option that a lot of new developers do is they use event tick. I've already got it set up, it does nothing at the moment. But this event tick is every single frame your CPU is processing. So for example, if your game is running at 60 frames per second, that is exactly how it sounds. It's running 60 frames every single second. A tick is by default running every single frame. So 60 times a second, this is going to be running. Now ask yourself, when you're building your code, if you are wanting to see when the player arrives from this corner to that corner, do you need to be checking 60 times a second for that to happen? No, absolutely not. Even if you're running 30 FPS for your game, 30 frames per second, you do not need to be running that check every single second 30 times. I'd argue every second is even pushing it. So what I tend to do is if I have to have something in event tick, is I tend to come to my class settings and I change my tick interval from 0, which means every single frame, to 5. Every 5 seconds. And if it's something where you don't want the delay, tune it down, 2 seconds, 1 second. Because every 1 second is 60 times more efficient than running it every single frame. So this is what I'm saying. If you're using event tick for like a smooth rotation, so maybe you want something to always face the character, the lower the tick amount, the smoother it's going to be. But 60 times a second, you'll have to test it and see what you think. Animations sometimes run at 60 frames per second, because you can notice that. But if you're building your game at 30 frames per second, you don't need a 60 frames per second animation. So this is what I mean. Learn event-driven programming whilst you're designing it. So When you press a key, it does something. Make it work that way. If you're waiting for something to happen, look up event dispatchers. So here. So on gameplay tags change, I've added this in. This is an event dispatcher, or called a delegate. And this is basically a megaphone. And a megaphone and an ear, if you wish. When you call or broadcast the event dispatcher, you are speaking through the megaphone. Hey, I've just done this. Okay, perfect. And then you have your ear or your listener or your bind to the event dispatcher. And you're saying, hey, tell me when you do this. So that event dispatcher doesn't tick. It doesn't sit waiting, taking up frames. It just waits silently, like a ninja. And then as soon as that is broadcast, they react to it. And this is a great way of building your game because it is so efficient. If you imagine all of the systems in this game I've got, the boards, the movement, the running, the boats, the people, the dialogue, if they were all waiting on tick saying, hey, tell me this, hey, tell me this, hey, tell me this, all waiting, it will make the game lag really, really badly because it's having to process this every single frame, potentially 60 times a second, which is insane. You don't need that. So event-driven programming, like the event dispatcher, or the input keys, or even collision triggers. So you see this big circle here? This is a trigger on this actor. All that is there for is if the actor has initial dialogue when you walk up to him, so you don't have to interact with him. Most people have dialogue on my game where you walk up, you look at them, you press talk. But some people, like bandits, if you walk inside this circle, they'll immediately talk to you. That's event driven. It is when you hit that trigger. You could tick on this bandit, check the player's distance when they're getting closer to you. But if I'm all the way over here, on top of this really cool Sinti pyramid, and that guy's ticking me, well, that's just wasted processing. So learn event-driven programming. Think, if you need to do something, how often do you actually need to do it? If you generally need to do it every single frame, do it. Absolutely. You might need it, but I can't think of a single case where you need to do something every single frame, bar play and animation. That's it. So tip 8 is casting. People have a love-hate relationship with casting because casting can make your game heavier and harder to run because you're casting everything together. What is casting then? So casting is where you take one blueprint class, so we'll say, who are you? Elven Warden, and we cast to, say, this box here. This means that when Unreal compiles it, this guy knows he needs to cast to that box, so because he needs it, Unreal will load him and the box in memory, even if the box is not needed. Because it's casting to it. Unreal knows it needs it, so it will load it into memory. So if this guy is on level 1 of 12, and this box only exists on level 12, if you cast to it, that box will be loaded in memory throughout every single level. Not great, because you don't need it. It's more performance. It's more hit on your RAM casting to it. But this is where the love-hate relationship comes with it, because even though the casting does load that into memory, a lot of people say, right, you shouldn't cast at all then. No. There's exemptions for it. For example, on my player pawn, that player pawn is always going to use the same player controller. And the player controller is always loaded into memory. So is the player pawn. So casting between them isn't a massive deal because they're always loaded into memory. So let's show a live example of this then. So I will come and create a folder here called test, right? And inside here, blueprint class, I'll just create a basic actor called test actor with no space. I'll drag it into the scene. If I right click on this actor and do size map, you will see it's just a big circle. And all this is telling us is this actor is a blueprint and it's 21 kilobytes in size. Okay. I can also look at the reference viewer and see that this actor is only referenced by the world map. So only the world map is using this actor. This actor's using nothing else, right? However, if I come to my test actor and on event begin play, I get all actors with tag, and we'll just search for player. And on the out actors, I'll do get, and I'll cast this actor to my CBP sandbox character, right? I'll cast to it. I'm not actually going to do anything with it. But if I compile and save now, If I check the size map out, you will see, look how big my character is now. It's 1.1 gig in size, which is huge. Meaning when this test actor is loaded in, it's going to load this sandbox character in as well, because it needs it. The actual blueprint itself is so small I can't even see it on the bloody size map. But the bigger a cube is here, the more red it is, the more space it's using. And you can see the numbers here. So my entire sandbox character is 1.1 gig. Why is it that big? It appears to be the gasp animations, all these animations here. It's just adding it up so big. It's fine, don't worry about that. Because 1.1 gig sounds huge, but it's used in every single part of the game, so it's fine. But then if we also check the reference map, you'll see it's also linking to the sandbox character. And then this sandbox character, if I browse to this asset, and I reference view at this, is also linking to all of this. So just by me loading the test actor, because I'm casting to the player, loads the player, and because the player's loaded, it loads all of this as well. And then because all of this is loaded, say the jail cell, we can use the reference viewer on the jail cell. It will also go and load all of this stuff. So do you see the waterfall effect you have? Casting can be bad. It can massively increase your memory. It can massively increase your references. It's why a lot of people don't like casting. But casting does have its place. If you have two actors that are always loaded in together, they're literally just two actors because it makes it easier. You can cast to it without a problem because they're always loaded in memory. But how do you get around it then if you don't cast to it? You can use something called interfaces. So right now, look, I'm using the sandbox character here, and it's taking up a gig in memory and it's loading everything on this sandbox character, right? If I come and create a basic interface, it's essentially telling them, hey, you have this function. But that's all I care about, this function, that's it. Don't tell me anything else about yourself. So if I just right click blueprint interface, and we'll call it BPI underscore test, or test badly. In here, if I come and call it, I don't know, get current health, sure, something like that. And it returns their health. Because maybe this test actor needs to know what the character's health is, right? Then on this test actor, instead of getting the player like that, instead, if I just call get health, so from my BPI test look, plug it in there, that's it. I've removed the cast to the player. But if I look at the size map now, look at how small it is. It's 44 kilobytes, and it's still doing everything I need, the code. So you can see my interface here is 10 kilobytes because it's just returning an integer, and it's got the logic of the interface, but it's also got this test actor here. So you might be thinking, but I've not added anything to the player, and that's right. That's why you'll come to the sandbox character, class settings, remove the search, you'll come to implemented interfaces, and you'll add your custom one. So you can see I've already got one called BPI character, right? This is on all my NPCs, all my characters, and this has a ton of functions on it, right? Send to jail, get the ALS stuff which I need to remove, AI stuff, factions, all stuff like that. If I, instead of using get current health, use one of them, say send to jail, right? And I compile and save, that's still an interface, but if I check it out on the size map now, it's still 141 kilobytes. But yet it's using the character, it's calling their code, it's sending them to jail. But look how small it is. And even better, on the reference viewer, there, it's loading the BPI character look. And if I edit this and look at the reference viewer of this one, this is referencing these four things. That's it. Another interface, a PDA faction, which is a primary data asset, and an enum. That's it. Compared to casting to the character and the sheer amount they loaded. So as you can see, casting isn't great. In some cases, it can be absolutely huge. However, in other cases, it's not, because it's always loaded. So really, it comes down to, when you're building your game, know what's loaded in memory or not. If your player is spawned in, and they want access to this cube, one time in one level, 2 hours into your game, you probably don't need to cast to it. Just use an interface. However, if the player has a backpack with him, and he carries that backpack throughout a vast majority of the game, you're probably not going to be too bad with casting to it. It does tie up the references, as my Unreal has lovingly so crashed. Thank you for that, Unreal. But that's just where it comes to knowing your game. So now that I've opened back up, we've covered casting, where you're tying your project up and making it neater. Another tip is organise your project from the start. You can't imagine some of the states I've seen projects where people have just put assets everywhere. Like, these 5 here are annoying me that they're not organised away somewhere. And I'm not saying every single file needs to be in an asset, but group things together. I've got a folder called blueprints. All my blueprints go in there. I know I can open up and find all my blueprints. Look, yeah? Animations are in there. AI is in here. All my asset packs that can be moved are in here. And yes, I love the Cinti packs, as you can see. But organise your projects according to you. I don't think there is one right standard, which comes back to point 1. There isn't a perfect solution. I get asked all the time, what project structure do you use? I follow this one. Roughly AI, animations, asset packs, blueprints, and some others. I still want to tidy this up a little bit more, but it just helps having some form of structure, but also naming standards. Epic do actually have a naming standard or naming convention. When you import assets and stuff, they have this recommendation here. So actor components are called AC, animation blueprints are called ABP, and there's a ton more. So you'll see blueprints are called BP look, and then there's loads of them. I think there's a GitHub somewhere where a guy adds like tons more, but I can't remember them. Even Tom Lumen's got his own naming standards look. Some of them make sense. Some of them you might not like and you'll probably want to change for yourself. That happens too. Maps. I call mine M underscore for map. Some people call it L. Some people call it LVL. I've seen projects from Unreal that came out where they've literally used 2 different naming standards for maps because 2 different devs worked on them. Not great. But the point is, come up with a naming standard and just organise your project. It can make or break your game when you're looking for something. And it helps you keep on top of keeping it organised and neat, so you don't break things by accident. Let's delete that test folder because I don't want it. And this is the final one. This one is just more of a, not a beginner thing, but it's just a lot of people forget it, so beginners are going to forget it as well. And that's, if you are doing anything at all with AI, and you want them to move around, you need to add a Nav Mesh. It's one thing I see so many people forget, including experienced developers, that they can't move around. They've got everything set up, the AI's moving, every tutorial says it should move around. Simply look at your AI and press the P key for potato. If your world doesn't glow green like that, you haven't got a Nav Mesh available or in the right place. A Nav Mesh is how Unreal can calculate where somebody needs to go to. It uses something like the A-star algorithm for AI movement or something like that. But it basically says, hey, they're here, create a ton of points, basically tiny cubes all over this green thing. And then when I tell him to walk to here, he connects to every single green point, straight down the screen, and then he knows how to get to it. If you don't have a Nav Mesh, Unreal will ignore doing that because it thinks they're not allowed to walk on it. So take my water, for example. There's no Nav Mesh here. If I tell that guy to walk to here on the water, he won't, because he knows he can't get there. So for the final tip, for 10 mistakes beginner Unreal devs make sure you add your Nav Mesh in. We've even added a dev tool that automatically adds the Nav Meshes into new tools for us, just because it makes it far easier. So you can see on this dev map here, I pressed the P key, it automatically added a Nav Mesh look, just because that's what the tool does. But there you go, ladies and gentlemen. There is 10 tips that beginner Unreal devs make that can make or break your game. So in summary, tip 1, don't worry too much about the perfect solution. It does not exist. Throw that concept away. There is only the solution that works for you, or you do nothing. That's it. Absolutely talk to people, get their opinions. They may inform you of something you've never heard of that will just feel right to you. Don't always go with the latest and greatest on everything unless you absolutely need to. You're going to run into bugs, your Unreal will crash, it will be unstable. don't do it. It's not worth it. Using old tutorials, always try to find tutorials that match your engine version if you can. Sometimes it's impossible because the concept just won't be there. Other times, you're going to be far better off trying to follow it. Don't try to overuse plugins, but don't avoid plugins at all. Find the sweet balance that works for you. You're doing this because you enjoy making games. If you're in it to make money, then, well, you're going to struggle. But you're doing this to make games, so find a balance that works for you. Yes, you might want to code everything yourself from scratch. Great, it's a great learning exercise. But if realistically, if you want to make a game, plugins will save you countless hours. And equally, the templates that are built into Unreal are a great starting point just to get you up and running if you want to play around with something. On the flip side, don't avoid all the code, because code can add new things to your equipment arsenal that you wouldn't have had equally before. And then if you've got past all of that and you are starting to make your game, try to lean into event-driven programming, where things only react to other events. Event ticks can be useful in some cases, but they'll bog down your game a lot if you use them for minor things. Don't cast to everything. It increases your reference map, it increases your RAM size, your game will become sluggish and slow. Just try to use interfaces if you can, or cast if you know you're going to be okay with it. Make sure you organise your project so you've got everything organised properly. It just makes it far easier when you need to find something, because you instantly know which folder to jump into. And then finally, for the icing on top, remember to add your nav meshes. You're going to run into issues if you don't add your nav mesh. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. I hope this was helpful. If you did learn anything from this, I'd love to know below, so comment below if you did learn something, or if you've got any other tips that are broadly available to Unreal beginners, let me know below. It might be good to make a follow-up video. So thank you for watching, I hope this was helpful. My name is Decryption, and I will see you next time.